Hey up, campers. Hope you're okay. Johnny Matthew here. Welcome back to the blog for another one of our blog pods. So basically, this is the voiceover of the text blog post that you can find over on Substack, johnnyvm.substack.com. If you want to go there and read the text, there's huggings of links and other things there that might be useful, but it's great to have you here. If this is your first time, welcome. It's fab that you're here. If you've been here before and or you would just like to support the work, you're very welcome to do that. I'd be very appreciative of it. I'm trying to give roughly about a day a week to doing these. I never quite make it. It's a bit less than that, and I'm often rushing at night time or the weekends. But the more support, the merrier, and I'm very grateful. So you can nip over to the text blog, and there are some links there if you want to become a paid subscriber. I think you can do it for $5, so that would be very welcome. But of course, if you want to listen for free, that's what it's here for, and I hope you enjoy it. So this is the second in our series of theory bites. Last week we posted the summary of Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of moral development. So we're just continuing that theme, but it was too long just to do the theory and the application all in one post, so we split them into two. So welcome to this one. I hope you enjoy it. So here we go. Theory Bites 6b, Lawrence Kohlberg, theory of moral development, application. Introduction. In our last post, we began looking at Kohlberg's theory of moral development. We saw where it, and he, fits into the theorising of his time and the basic structure of his theory. For professionals working with children, especially those recovering from developmental trauma and or who offend, understanding Kohlberg's theory can help us, I think. It can help us to think as well about and guide more effective interventions and foster a healthier morality in the kids that we work with. It can allow us to drill down beyond the surface behaviour or the obvious presentations, if you like, of the child and look more, drill down below the surface, really, and see more broadly about how their experiences may have impaired not just development generally, but their moral development specifically. Doing this means, I think anyway, we can avoid falling into some of those quick judgments or unhelpful heuristics that we can all get into from time to time, and it can help structure our thinking and gain a degree of objectivity that's essential for ensuring that we serve this child in front of us as well as we can. And if our assessments and intervention planning is better, which I think good theory always improves those things, then the child's going to do better and will optimise the change that they can make, hopefully, too. So a really quick summary of the stages and levels. Again, this is very brief. For a fuller coverage of that, look at the Theory Bites 6a, which was out last week. So the stages and levels again briefly. So Kohlberg organises his theory into 6 stages, and they were then subdivided into 3 different levels. So there's basically 3 levels with 2 stages in each one. The levels are pre-conventional level. Think of that as the childhood level, if you like. Then there's a conventional level where most kind of adolescents and adults will sit. And then there's the post-conventional level, level 3, which is more rarely achieved, but is that kind of higher level of kind of moral and ethical thinking. So, number 1, pre-conventional level, 2 stages here, usually childhood these. So stage 1, obedience and punishment orientation. So in this stage, rules are fixed, decisions are made basically to avoid punishment. Stage 2, self-interest orientation. So actions are still driven by self-interest and the immediate benefits. Now, other people might benefit as well, but it's still mainly about me, but if they benefit, that's fine. So that's the pre-conventional level. Obedience and punishment at stage 1, self-interest stage 2. Then level 2, conventional level. This is more typical as kids move into adolescence. So stage 3, interpersonal accord and conformity, and stage 4, authority and social order maintaining orientation. So stage 3, here there's a focus on being a good person, quotes. It's about meeting expectations, prioritizing relationships and social approval. So it's not just doing it to avoid punishment or to further self-interest, as in stage 1 and 2. In stage 3, it's a bit more, well, actually, other people like it when I do this, and they approve of me, so I might do it for that reason as well. Then stage 4, authority and social order maintaining orientation. So this really then is more a focus on the legalities, I suppose, but also order. There's a bit about duty in here, upholding social rules and norms. But it's not just about me and one or two others. There's a wider sense at stage 4 of maintaining a functioning society, that greater good stuff, I suppose. So that's level 2, the conventional level. So stage 3, the interpersonal accord and conformity. In stage 4, authority and social order. And then the third level, what Kohlberg calls the post-conventional level. This is one that's achieved, but not that often, by some adults. So in this level, stage 5, he called social contract orientation, and stage 6, he called universal ethical principles. So stage 5, there's an awareness that rules and laws exist to serve society, but they can be changed if they're unjust. So decisions are based on fairness and human rights. So rules are important, but we might need to change them. You see that kind of flexibility and kind of meta thinking coming in a bit here. And then at stage 6, universal ethical principles. So this is where a person's moral behaviour is guided by abstract moral principles, big ideas like justice, equality, and dignity, which supersede kind of statutes and kind of laws. So there we go. Those are the 6 stages in the 3 levels. So we'll take a few seconds breather while I grab a quick drink and dry the drain a little bit, and then we'll come back. Okay, applying Kohlberg's theory in practice. For children recovering from developmental trauma, their moral development may be delayed, impaired, or disrupted. Trauma can create trust issues, boundary problems, and emotional dysregulation, as well as a raft of associated behavioural and presentational issues. Now, in my working world of youth justice and forensic mental health, a child's offending, inverted commas, is simply the official recognition that something they did broke the law, or something they may have done broke the law. For us, though, being able to zoom out and look at the broader developmental context for the child's current functioning is critical. Certainly if we're going to avoid adding to their problems through criminalisation and punishment, when really what they need is kindness, understanding, and treatment. Now, Kohlberg, like lots of theoreticians, I think can help us think more clearly and non-judgmentally, giving kids the best chance of emerging from the justice system, or any other system for that matter, unscathed. So here's a few thoughts about practical ways Kohlberg's theory might help guide us as childcare professionals, concerned parents, and so forth. And as always with this, not an exhaustive list, just kind of some things that came to me as I was digging around in the theory, and wondering, really asking that big question about, okay, this theory sounds great, but how it's going to help me on the ground with the kids that we're working with. So here we go. I think there's, let's have a look, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's nine of these, and then another strong recommendation at the end. So I'll work through these one at a time. There's 2 or 3 bullet points under each one, and hopefully they'll be useful. So number 1, build trust and safety first. Couple of things here. Create and encourage consistent, predictable environments where children can feel secure, and be transparent about expectations and consequences. So in terms of consistent, predictable environments, safety is a bulwark against reactivity, which is so often the driver of problem behaviour. So anything we can do to build safety is really important. In fact, it's primary. And then be transparent about expectations and consequences. There's so much talk about restorative approaches that there has to be something to restore kids to. And I think restorative approaches of all kinds, certainly restorative justice, can miss this sometimes. I think some practitioners are brilliant at keeping this in play. But so often what's written about it and the sort of policy and practice documents you read, they miss this bit that we're talking about restorative here, but what exactly are we restoring the kid to? Often there isn't something. So let's start by working on that. Now, I guess in Kohlbergian terms, if a child is to begin identifying with a group such that they have incentives to conform and do their bit for social order or whatever, stages 3 and 4 of the model, then the group has to be worth investing in. And safety will really encourage that. So I guess this first kind of practice tip here really is about building safety and security. If the kid is wobbling too much, if they're way too labile, if life is inconsistent and lacks routine, then we have to get that in place first. Number 2, address emotional regulation. Now, trauma can massively undermine safety and impair emotional control. So supporting children to recognise and manage emotions effectively is key. Children won't be able to think about, never mind employ, more complex, socially interactive skills like, theory of mind and empathy. They can't do that if they're still trapped at the beck and call of their own feeling states. We can gently and empathically lean into what they're feeling and apply label words to those feelings. We can appropriately share our own feelings in relation to events and situations. All of that can help kids begin getting a sense of what emotions mean, what causes them, and how to self-soothe. Strategies like this that provide a kind of emotional coaching, if you like, can begin to allow children to settle in themselves. Once they do, they're much more likely to begin acting with a little more deliberation rather than just reacting. And that's essential if truly moral behaviour is to develop. Now, in my view, for what it's worth, it's a lack of overt recognition of this idea in Kohlberg's theory that lets it down a bit for me. It seems to assume that children have what I think of as kind of higher order, pretty complex faculties, things like theory of mind and metacognition. But actually, many of them still sort of what I call pinballing between emotional states that they've got little insight into. It's like the ball bearing in the pinball machine. They ping back and forth between feelings and experiences and emotions and reactions. So addressing that stuff early on is really important. Number 3, assess moral development. So having a sense of where a child's at, according to the theory, outline sense is useful. So we can use Kohlberg's stages as a framework to understand where a child currently sits. Now, there's no rigid taxonomies here. I say this for every theory that we covered, and it's important to keep saying it. But a look over the stages will give us a sense, even an outline general sense of where a child may be on their journey of moral development. We need to adjust interventions based on whether the child operates at a pre-conventional or a conventional level, so level 1 or level 2. In other words, Are they, for example, are they in a childhood mode of kind of moral functioning that's simplistic, egocentric, maybe with a bit of a sense of others' welfare emerging, but it's still mainly hedonistic and self-seeking? Well, if they are, then they're probably in that pre-conventional level somewhere. And we can look at the stage description, stage 1 and 2, to drill down more specifically to where they might be at. Or are they showing some maturity in their ethical thinking, looking for social approval in some things and interested in being thought of as a, quote, good person? In which case, they're more likely in the pre-conventional level somewhere. So that would be in stages 3 or 4. So again, we don't want to get distracted and stressed about slotting a kid exactly into a category, but having a general sense of it can be useful. It's another little litmus test of progress, I suppose. Number 4, tailor our interventions. So, for example, for children at stage 1, that's the kind of obedience and punishment stage. So I'm doing the, quotes, right thing because I don't want to be punished. That's all there is to it. Now, kids at this stage, we can focus on building trust, creating structure, building safety and security. Make these things the priority. Keep your appointments, things like where, when, and how you meet as consistent as possible. The more predictability that's built into the child's sort of timetable, I guess, the better. And so tailoring our interventions for where they're at on this is really useful. So if they're at an early stage, which means they're kind of stuck in a developmental mode of moral thinking, then we need to, an early developmental mode of moral thinking, then we need to tighten things up on the structure and routine level. In trauma recovery model, or TRM terms, that would be down to level 1 stuff as well. But for those at stage 2 in Kohlberg's theory, that's the self-interest orientation. Well, we can focus on and comment about the feelings and experiences of others. Asking questions about how they think someone else might feel or think can encourage kids to actively kind of go there, quote marks, and begin building empathy and mentalizing others. Now, if this is tricky, well, start by helping them to articulate their own feelings and thoughts and subjective experiences before then introducing comments about the same stuff in other people. But once we have a sense of where the child might be in their progression and development, we can think more clearly and specifically about how we can augment and encourage this along. And wherever they are, of course, our interventions need to fit that as snugly as possible. Number 5, create ethical dilemma discussions. A couple of things here. Use age-appropriate moral dilemmas and discuss real situations that might arise. So use age-appropriate moral dilemmas to encourage children to think critically about right and wrong. Chatty and informal conversations that look back on choices made, situations encountered, and explore ideas are easy but useful. Helping kids run different fun scenarios is another way of intervening positively. So, the old one about if there was a beggar, a bank manager, and a bride swimming towards a 2-person lifeboat, which 2 would you rescue and why? And you could just have some fun with that. But again, it's another easy way of intervening positively to propagate moral growth without feeling like an intervention at all. It's good stuff, and you can have some fun with it. And then discussing real life situations that might arise for the child in future and giving them opportunity to think in advance about their options and the pros and cons of each. It's not only useful in terms of kind of mental preparation and rehearsal, but it also focuses them on the moral meaning of their decisions and the possible impact, not only for themselves, but on other people too. And many of the kids we work with come from complex family situations, don't we? And they different social groups, and they're plugged into different networks. And then there's the online world, and then there's these kind of fractured and disparate family relationships, and going to contact and all of that. So again, if we can help them to kind of stop the train and the chaos a bit by building safety and helping them with regulation and getting a sense of their moral stage and tailoring what we do, those first 4 things, then we can, once we've stopped that, we can then help them to think, well, what do you think might come up when you go on your next contact visit? Or what do you think's going to happen, when XYZ, you change school, if your relationship breaks up with your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, and just project forward a little bit and just gently splash around in that. I think that can be helpful to give kids not only a sense that they have options, but also that it is useful to think about things in advance a bit as well. So that's number 5, create ethical moral discussions. Number 6, foster perspective taking. So there's 3 bits here. Use word and picture work, and you can do that, secondly, by putting feelings and face pictures into context. And then there's thirdly, that sort of high-level stuff, storytelling, group discussions, role-playing and things. So we're talking about fostering perspective-taking. So use word and picture work to help children understand the emotions and experiences of their own and in others. I used to do a lot of this, actually, using a pile of cuttings from newspapers and magazines of people with different facial expressions. So to start with, we can work with the child to match up feeling faces and feeling words, for example, if they lack the vocabulary, and they haven't had those attachment experiences that attach label to things. We can help to unpick that by providing opportunities. So I have a whole list of feeling words, about 60 or 70 of them, and then a whole pile of faces, and we just spread them both out and we just try and match them up, and it's good fun. So we can start the work with the child to match up the feelings and faces, this is useful if they've had these poor attachment experiences. So they begin to learn those language labels, not just for faces, but the feelings behind the faces. So we're building into a kind of a theory of mind stuff, and eventually that kind of mentalization stuff, but also bodily states. What might be going on in this person's body? Are they well? Are they not well? If they're not well, what might be going on? That kind of thing. Now, most kids begin learning all that stuff, these word labels for feelings and emotions and sort of bodily experiences from very early on from their attachment figure in the pre-verbal stage. But if they haven't had that, we can backfill some of that stuff by this kind of work. As they progress then, secondly, we can use some pictures that just show the face and others that place the person in context, in a scene. I remember I used to have one of a very fat older man in the 1940s or something, with a kind of home-knitted woolen tank top, shirt sleeves rolled up and a knotted hanky on his head. And you just see the face and he looks absolutely, tranquil and delighted. But then I had another picture which is the same fella but zoomed out, and he's sitting in a deck chair on a beach with his face up to the sun, and the context makes a little bit more sense of what's going on for him. But you can have an initial discussion about why might he be looking so chuffed with himself, and that's useful, and then you can put him in the situation and it makes more sense. So we can do that, but then we can chat about how the person is feeling, but also why they might be feeling the way they are. How might we, if we wanted to, be able to help them feel differently, if they need to feel calmer or happier or less upset and so on. That stuff can really help link emotion and action and context together, and ultimately, I suppose, fosters empathy. We can also use storytelling, group discussions and role-playing exercise exercises, when kids are ready for that, of course. And these can help to build empathy by learning from other people. And on it goes. So you can let your creativity loose here and just have some fun. But that idea of number 6 here is just anything we can do to foster perspective taking for this child. And of course, it may help, given the different family situations and depending on our relationship, we may want to help the kid explore their own family situations with that. We just need to be careful with that if in doing so, we're going to solicit very difficult emotions. And if there's huge trauma there and none of that's been processed, we need to use extreme caution and kind of stay in our lane if we're not qualified to do that. But if we've got experience and that's our thing, we can do that as well if it seems appropriate. Number 7, set clear, compassionate boundaries. So 2 bits here mainly. Boundaries need to be firm but communicated with care, and we need to avoid punitive approaches. So boundaries need to be firm but communicated with care. So here, I think we're looking to strike the balance between a more kind of Durkheimian, educative, sort of pedagogical approach to moral reasoning. Emil Durkheim and the belief that schools had a role in teaching children morality. And then the more kind of autonomous group moral kind of osmosis, I think, of Jean Piaget. So I suppose, sorry, this is me being a bit geeky, but I suppose this is, in general terms, there's a bit of a tension, I guess, here between sociology, the Durkheim stuff, and the psychology of the Kohlberg stuff. But I digress. Anyway, so kids need to know where the edges are. This is the thing. So we're talking about setting clear, compassionate boundaries. They need to know where the edges are, this thus far and no further. And these will need to flex and evolve as they grow over time, of course. But children who may have lacked clarity on what's okay and what's not will need us to be clear so they know the extent of the arena they have to work and learn within. And so that applies not just to where they're living and how they treat other people, but also when we see them, how they conduct themselves when they're with us, and the norms that we expect there. Again, clear, firm, but done kindly and with care. Now, eventually, of course, they'll need the freedom to explore ideas, to disagree with authority, and rehearse trying out their own possibilities. I mean, don't all teenagers do that? Shouldn't all teenagers do that? Of course they should. But the key is to tailor the parameters within which they function, the boundaries and the edges, such that they can do the early learning that they may have missed. And in doing so, start to feel safe and settled. Then they can do the moral and ethical exploration that all kids need in order to arrive at and cement their own preferential morality, if we can call it that, into place. So just a word about punitive approaches here. Using punitive approaches when the boundaries get crossed can hold kids back, I believe, in terms of moral growth. Stalling them in stage 1, that avoidance of punishment bit, rather than encouraging a growing sense of belonging and eventually group identification and a sense of the greater good. If we say, essentially, I know we'd never say this, but go with me. If we say, this is how you behave, or this is going to be the punishment, it really is all about the punishment. What we're asking you is not to do this because of X, Y, Z, it's good for you, it's good for me, it's good for other people, we're clear on what's going on. It's all about you doing this, because if you don't, we're going to bash you with this. That keeps kids stuck in that stage 1 where they're looking basically to avoid the bad stuff, rather than giving them a sense of the why behind the boundary, so that they can then begin to maybe see the reason for it, even if they don't want to do it, in the hope that they'll eventually move towards kind of embracing that for themselves and it becoming part of their own kind of moral framework, if you like. 2 more. Number 8, reinforce positive behaviour. Praise and celebrate ethical decision-making and small moral victories. Now, even if there's loads of room for further progress, which there nearly always is, of course, the very fact that a child has thought about something and or made a good decision is reason enough for celebration, isn't it? Now, we need to be cautious here not to make the praise too lavish, and we need to take care to target the effort rather than the talent with our praise, because that'll avoid the praise itself feeling a bit overwhelming and, maybe running contrary to the kid's more negative sense of self, in which case they may just reject the praise and we've wasted our time. So it's the action, the decision, the choice, the behaviour that we want to highlight for encouragement. Carol Dweck wrote a really good book called Mindset, and I found it useful when my kids were teenagers, that addresses this whole thing of targeted praise. So I'll put a link in the text post for that. And then secondly, on reinforcing positive behaviour, encourage persistence, even in small moral dilemmas. Now, change always comes incrementally, doesn't it? So helping the child to understand this by taking a kind of one step at a time approach is wise. Big change comes off the back of accumulated small ones. So making our expectations, language used, and practice applied around this will help guide kids through big leaps in a series of baby steps. It's just, if it's incremental and small, it's manageable, but they get there in the end. And then lastly, number 9, address trauma and its impact on moral development. So recognize that trauma can stunt the progression of moral reasoning. Abused children get trapped in the fear and harm caused by what they've been through, spending their formative years in way too much fight and flight sets up the body and emotions to be stuck in a quasi-survival mode. The Kohlbergian ideas of group identity, social and legal conformity, personal duty, and working for the common good, all of these get subverted by the need to feel safe and get through the day. You revert to the simple, I need to stay alive and feel okay here. I haven't got time to think about anybody else, never mind the common good. So without opportunity to settle into safety, learn from the patient compassion of others and adopt a more positive sense of self, kids remain stuck, such that progress to stages 3 and 4, the kind of normal adult stuff, never mind the higher moral ideals of stages 5 and 6, remain Herculean and almost certainly out of reach. So recognize the impact of trauma. And then, of course, identify and address traumagenic functioning as a priority. So things like, if sleep is disturbed, if relationships are fraught, routine is elusive, or emotions are, up and down, labile. Anything approaching normative cognitive development remains impaired. So, ergo, moral reasoning is absolutely going to be stalled too, because it's much more complex. So noting these kind of symptoms, looking for patterns, getting advice where necessary from clinical colleagues will all help us keep the historical context of the child's presentation in view. As I often say in training courses and things, taking the child out of the trauma is pretty straightforward. Taking the trauma out of the child takes time. But this is time that they absolutely need if their wider cognitive and emotional progress is going to be restarted or can be restarted, which in turn will allow progress in their moral development as well. So there's 9 there. Build safety and trust first, address emotional regulation issues, assess the moral stage of their development, tailor intervention to suit always, create ethical dilemma discussions, foster perspective taking, set clear compassionate boundaries, reinforce positive behaviour, and address the impact of trauma on development. Just a quick word, I said there were 9 practice ideas and then an extra one. This is the extra one. Supporting childcare professionals. Self-care is crucial. I know I harp on about this, but working with traumatized children is emotionally taxing, and sometimes it can feel downright overwhelming. To have any chance of hanging in there for the long haul, we must prioritize our own well-being to remain effective. So, consider, number 1, Regularly assessing your personal stress levels. And I've put a link in the text post to a questionnaire called the ProQoL, PROQOL. That can really help. It's a questionnaire about sort of current stress levels, satisfaction in work, and so on. Useful litmus test. Number 2, maintain healthy boundaries. Now, while we all use appropriate self-disclosure and self-deprecation is a particular favourite of mine in our work to some degree, maintaining a sense of balance in this is important. And this will ensure that we keep a healthy separation between our personal selves and our working selves. And then number 3 on this, reflect on your why to stay motivated during challenging times. The why is in inverted commas there. So when progress is slow, or it's tricky, or we're going through a really tough patch with the kid, or it's been a horribly fraught day, and this can happen a lot with trouble kids, can't it? It's easy for our mojo to get slowly depleted. Now, if you notice this, it can help to revisit why you do what you do and reinforce that sense of mission. It just kind of puts some fuel back in the tank. So we all have our own ways of keeping well in the work. But when work strays into areas of morality, whether it be criminality, violence, and or mental distress and its correlates, the toll on us can be greater than usual, and it can stretch our ways of coping too. So remaining vigilant to the impact of our work and the potential for vicarious trauma makes a commitment to getting and staying well all the more important. Final thoughts. So there it is. Kohlberg's theory of moral development. We unpacked that last week. And this week, some ideas about how we can allow it to inform our practice. In my view, Kohlberg offers a useful framework for understanding moral development in children. For childcare professionals like us, it provides a roadmap that can really help to structure our thinking and thereby usefully inform assessments and interventions, helping us to include children's ethical growth among the many other factors that we take into account along the way. However, we must always remind ourselves that each child is unique and interventions must be flexible, compassionate, and trauma responsive as we seek to tailor everything for this child and their individual needs. The goal is not just to help children make better decisions, but to empower them with the reasoning skills and emotional resilience needed to navigate life's moral dilemmas. And we must look after ourselves too, of course. And right now, as always, there are lots and lots of moral dilemmas out there in the world and reasons for us to feel the impact of it all. So I hope a bit of an unpacking of Kohlberg and a bit of application of Kohlberg's theory of moral development is useful. Thank you for being here, guys, and I will look forward to see you in the next one. Cheers.